Today I'm going to be talking about India and a little bit of India's history from the colonialism point, like from when the British colonized India to when India got its independence. Um, so yeah, I don't know if y'all know, but the background is supposed to be similar to the Indian flag. On the actual Indian flag, it's like a orange strip on top, white, and then green on the bottom with a blue wheel in the middle. This one doesn't have the wheel, obviously, but it's supposed to look like that. So, it's a little bit about me. I am a junior at UNC. I'm an English major, and I have a math and a French minor. I was actually born in India, and we moved here when I was 2 years old. And I grew up speaking three different languages. I spoke Hindi, Tamil, and English, and I'm still fluent in all three. And I've traveled back to India multiple times. I'm actually going back again this summer to see my cousin get married. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. That's my picture. Um, so how, hang on. I can't see this if I do that. Got it?
I'll leave it. Is it showing now?
Yeah, do you know how to see the the students?
Mm-hmm. Not sure why it's not, but I'll keep an eye on it.
Okay. Let's just get rid of that. All right. So, how many of you know something about India already? And if you want, you can just come up to the camera, or you can tell your teacher, and she can put it into her chat box. Like what you already know about India, or like, do you know where it is? Do you know like in the world? Do you know anything about India's history? Any famous people from India? Just you can just brainstorm and let me know. Yeah, it is in Asia. You're right. It's in South Asia. That's true. Some women in India do put a red dot in their forehead. That's actually called a bindi, and it's for married women only and for Hindu women only. But yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right, that's fine. We can move on. So let's see. Uh-oh. So India's history is usually broken up into three like major time periods by most historians. It's like the three time periods that they usually use are the Hindu time, and then the Muslim time, and then the British time. But more like modern historians and even I like think that those are wrong classifications. They don't really cover the 3 time periods properly. So a lot of modern historians now like to break it up between ancient India and like empires that were in India, and then colonial India when the British were in power, and then post-colonial India, like present day India. So what I'm going to be talking about is colonial India, the second one right in the middle. And yeah, so here are some pictures. The top 2 are from the more older time period from ancient India and the empires. I don't know if y'all can recognize the top right picture of the Taj Mahal, the pretty famous monument in the world. And the top left picture is actually a picture of a very famous temple in India, in South India, and it's very colorful. They repaint it every year to make sure the colors stay pretty. And then the middle 2 black and white pictures are from the colonial period when the British were in India. In the middle left picture, there are some British people riding on top of an elephant. They're going tiger hunting in the forest. That was very popular amongst the more wealthy British people, the richer people. And on the middle right picture, it's actually a picture of the Queen visiting India back when the British owned it. And then the very bottom picture is a picture of modern India. That's actually a train system going right through the city of Bombay or Mumbai. It's like one of the most populated, one of the biggest cities in India. Kind of like our LA. Yeah, so moving on. India has in its past been part, I can't do this, okay. India has had many invaders come into the country. I mean, obviously, there's been the native Indians who've been there for the entire time, but also a lot of people have invaded India. The Greeks came way back in like the BC, like thousands of years ago, and Alexander the Great was a Greek soldier, and he was a commander, and he invaded India. He actually invaded a lot of Asia. And this is a painting of Alexander supposedly meeting one of the Indian kings back in that time. And then there were the Mughals and the Muslims who invaded India from like Eastern Europe / Western Asia and the Middle East. They came in and they started the Mughal Empire, which is one of the most prosperous times in Indian history, the most richest and I guess like happiest, wealthiest times of Indian history, and lots of books and lots of art, dances were like dance styles were created during that time. And that the bottom picture is a painting again of the Mughal Empire, and I believe in the middle is the king sitting next to his wife while there are a few dancers and like court people entertaining him. And because of these invaders, a lot of religions were brought to India. So every major religion in the world exists in India. Indians follow all religions. It's not just Hinduism or Islam. And yeah, they all live harmoniously and happily, so it's pretty nice. I don't know how to do this.
To the next one.
Okay. I'm just trying to. So I'll just keep going. So the British, like I was saying, came into India in the early 17th century. I don't know if you all have heard of the East India Trading Company. If you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean, they talk about it all the time. That's what all the British in those movies belong to, the East Indian Trading Company. And they were trying to find India, and started trading with India for a lot of their spices and a lot of their silks and fabrics and other things like gold and silver came out of India a lot. So yeah. And eventually, because they were trading with India a lot, they started creating like trading posts, and then those trading posts spread and became small cities. And then slowly they just took over a lot of India. And in this little map in the top right corner, you can see the East Indian Trading Company owned all of the pink area of India. And then all of the yellowish area was like kingdoms that were still remaining from the past. And the city of Calcutta, which is on the coast right about here-ish, right where the bend is, became the capital of British India. And it's still, when you go visit it now, you can still see a lot of the influences of the British, like their architecture, and they would plant like green gardens and like flowers from Britain to make it seem like back home, even though it was a different country. And the bottom picture right here is a big palace that they built in Calcutta. I don't like, as you can tell, it's very modern compared to the Taj Mahal and the temples that you saw on the first slide. And it's very green. You can see the hedges. There's a lawn with flowers and stuff. That's all British influence. And there's a fountain in the middle. Yeah, that's all very westernized. That's not a very Indian thing to have. Here are some more pictures of the British, like when they were in India. The big picture on the right is, I believe, a show. Like, I think they're just putting on like a horse show to show their like power. And then on the top left is another hunt when they were hunting tigers. You can see all the tigers lined up at the bottom. And because the British hunted tigers so much, they actually ended up endangering the species. So the Indian government is now trying to protect the species so that it can come back. And on the bottom corner, you can see the British ships are coming into the bay, and people are lining up to meet the ships because it was a huge part of their trading with the British was a huge part of their livelihood. So they were very excited. When the British were in India, they made lots of changes to society, especially in later times when the British Empire, when the Queen and the Crown took over the East Indian Trading Company and started controlling India. They made lots of changes. They made English the official language of the country. They founded 3 major universities that were not there before. And they introduced the English style of education, which is like what we follow here, like grade school education until university. That also didn't exist before. They brought a system of communication across the country with the telegraph, so you could communicate across the country. And they brought the world famous railroad system and road system to India. And they built the biggest railroad system in the entire world in India, and it's still going today. Everyone uses the main like method of transportation right now in India is the railroad. And yeah, so here are some more pictures. The huge map is the map of India, and all of the black lines of the railway system that they built. It goes all across India to every single city and through the countryside and everything, and even connects it to Asia and China and Tibet and Pakistan, Afghanistan, stuff like that. Just connects it to the rest of the world. And here's some more pictures. Here's the English education system on the top left. Like they built schools for the children. Schools where the children could sit at desks and be taught like a standard curriculum across India, which was not existing before, stuff like that. But they also brought a lot of their British culture. A lot of British people thought Indian traditions and Indian cultures were backwards or wrong or not like modern enough. So they brought their own culture. They brought Christianity to India, and they built a lot of churches and converted a lot of Indians. British laws were enforced, and only British people were able to hold higher power in the government, or even in like higher like level of jobs and stuff, because you needed an English education to qualify for those, and an English education meant you would have to go to university in England, which was very, very expensive for Indians. So they could not, a lot of Indians couldn't do that, so they were forced to keep lower level jobs. And a lot of these jobs included being servants to the British. Like a British captain and his family usually had a cook, a valet, a housekeeper, a grass cutter, a barber, a laundryman, a steward, a coolie for their luggage, like various household, like a nanny for their children, servants for various parts of their lives. And so all of these were native Indians, and they were all became servants of the British. And because of that, a lot of Indians did not like the British rule, and they did not like having lower level jobs, and they did not like being under the British power. So there was a lot of rebellions that took place. A lot of the Indian kingdoms that still existed, as you saw in the previous slide, there's a few kingdoms that still existed without being under British rule. They were constantly fighting with the British. And there was even a rebellion by the Indians within the British army that was established in a lot of cities in northern and central India. But the British quickly shut that down and stopped the rebellion and took back power across the country and created even stricter rules. So the Indians were like under even more, like, I guess, restraint, under more power, under more control, so they couldn't do much. And that just caused even more anger amongst the Indians. So that caused the rise of nationalism. Before this, India was, and it still is, like every state is almost like its own country of its sorts. Before the British, there was a bunch of small kingdoms, and that were all like separate from each other. They didn't really associate with each other. They did not have any sense of a country feeling or nationalism feeling. But because of the British rule, a lot of Indians came together, and like a nationalistic feeling, pride in like being Indian was formed. And the Hindu nationalist movement began. A lot of and Hinduism itself was changed. A lot of the backwards practices, or like child marriages, and like other like killing of brides, and a lot of like Hindu practices, traditional Hindu practices, were outlawed, and Hinduism was revived. And then so it would be more modernized, more fit for the times, and Hindus could work together. And they worked also with the Muslims in the country and with other religions to create a nationalistic feeling against the British. And the next big like rebellion or fight that happened was in 1919, when in Amritsar, which is a big temple, or which is a city where there is a big temple, a lot of fighting broke out and thousands of Indians were killed. This is actually a painting of that fight that happened. And so a lot of Indians were really, really angry about that. And one Indian who was especially angry and decided to do something about it was Gandhi, who went on to inspire a rebellion amongst all of the Indians, in all the native Indians. And together they all won India's independence from the British. I'm sure you've all heard of Gandhi. He's a very popular, very famous figure from India. So Gandhi is known as the father of India. He is one of the main leaders of the independence movement. He was born in India, but he was one of those few who could go to England and study in an English university. He went to London and became a lawyer. He was very privileged to be able to do that. And because of that, he was able to come back and be on the same level as the British in India, and be able to talk to the politicians and talk to them in legal terms, talk to them in English, and be able to debate with them and have like like legal conversations and political conversations, which made him very influential amongst them. And he actually started his political work in South Africa, where he helped the South Africans who were also under British rule get their independence. And then he left after like a decade or so and came back to India to lead the independence movement in India. And his main like idea behind the whole movement, his main I guess the most important part of the movement to him was that it would be non-violent. He did not like the killings that were happening between Indians and the British. He did not want anyone to die. He didn't want any families to be separated. So he emphasized that everything was going to be non-violent. There was going to be only peaceful protests. And that was actually a concept that was picked up by Martin Luther King Jr. in America, and that is in the civil rights movement here. So yeah, they were both actually occurring around the same time. And under the leadership of Gandhi and other political leaders, including Nehru, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was also very, very famous. All Indians across the country came together in a very like nationalistic movement. It was very, very new for Indians to feel this way, and peacefully protest the British. And one of the biggest protests that he led was the Salt March in 1930, where Gandhi walked many, many miles from the city that he lived in to the ocean to get salt from the water, because you know the ocean has salty water, so you can actually evaporate the ocean water and you'll have salt left behind. And that's how Indians used to get salt before the British came. And then but that was outlawed when the British came because of the East Indian Trading Company, and Indians were supposed to only buy salt from the British, and that salt was taxed heavily, so it was like very expensive for Indians. And he thought of that as a way of like keeping Indians low and like keeping them under control by the British. So he was like, we're going to protest against this. And he and thousands of his followers went to the ocean and got salt from the ocean, and that was a huge deal. Many of them were arrested, but it also got a lot of attention from international newspapers and from international like countries and organizations, and it caught the British crown, like the Queen's attention and the Crown's attention. And so starting like especially from there onwards, a lot of the British were like open to negotiations, and in 1947 India actually gained its independence and was a free country. And this picture right here is a picture of the day, or I'm assuming around the time India got its independence. Everyone is gathered for a big celebration, and the Indian flag is hoisted for the first time. This was created, the Indian flag was created during this movement, and everyone is wearing white because that is what Nehru, who was the other political leader that I was talking about, he only wore all white, and he wore a little white cap, and that was his garb. So everyone wore that, and it was supposed to show like their peacefulness and how they're not being violent, but they're still getting what they want. Unfortunately, even though everyone was working together well to oppose the British, against the British, that doesn't mean that they were working together well amongst each other. Hindus and Muslims were getting along peacefully at the beginning. However, by the end, Muslims were thinking that they also wanted their own country, and they also wanted their freedom from not only the British, but from Hindu rule that was existing before the British came, and that they wanted their own country. So when India got its independence, the day before India got its independence, which was India's independence is August 15th. So on August 14th, Pakistan was created from from like the previous lands of India. They actually partitioned India, and they cut off the top corner, and they created Pakistan right there, as you can see in green. And then they created East Pakistan in the little corner right, on the right side of India, on the eastern side of India. And that became Bangladesh after a few years, but at the beginning it was called East Pakistan and the West Pakistan. And they also created the land of Kashmir, which is a very disputed land because it wasn't technically given to Pakistan, but also wasn't technically given to India. And also China says they have some land, and there's some Chinese people living there, and then there's a few Tibetans living there, and it's just a lot of conflicts going on in that region even today because that land was not properly partitioned off. But as you can see, the red line is showing what India used to look like. That's how much land was in India when the British were ruling it. And then the small black line in between India and Pakistan is where India is now. And so these are a few pictures from the partition. As you can see from these arrows, the green arrows mean that these are movements of Muslim refugees away from India into Pakistan. And then the red is Hindu refugees from the designated Muslim Pakistan. They were leaving that and coming to Hindu India. And I use quotations because obviously India is not only a Hindu country, and Pakistan is not only a Muslim country. There are Hindus in both and Muslims in both countries. But the primary religion of Pakistan is Islam. So a lot of Hindus wanted to leave and come back to India. So these are some pictures of that movement. People were walking thousands and thousands of miles. A lot of people, especially older people and really young children, were suffered a lot during this time because they could not walk this long in such heat. But they made it somehow. And here people are literally riding on the tops of trains because the trains themselves are full just to get across because they wanted to move before the border was created and finalized, and they couldn't move across as freely anymore. So they're trying to figure out because the border went through families, people were living in that area, so they had to figure out where they were going to be living, what to do with their family, relocate and stuff like that. So that's what the railway system became really useful in that time to move everyone. And yeah, and now we have two different countries. We have India and we have Pakistan, and they're both free from British rule, and they both have their own governments, and India is now the Republic of India and is doing its own thing. So yeah, that is the end of my presentation, and now I'm going to have a pop quiz to see what all you guys learned. If you could just raise your hand or something when I ask these questions. Was the British government in India all bad, or was it all good? I don't know.